Hello, Guyana, and welcome to this week's edition of Facing the Nation. I'm Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us again this week. Well, it's been in the news. Guyana has recently experienced a major achievement. It really is a victory. So today you will hear all about that victory. The program is dedicated only to focus on that. And of course, you probably would have recently read in the news or even saw it on some of our television stations that Guyana has been recently removed from FATF's compliance document. Now, I know that sounds a bit heavy. It really is. So that is why I have the expert on that to talk about that right here on Facing the Nation today. So our entire program, most of our program, is dedicated to my conversation with none other than the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honorable Basil Williams. He will even talk to you about how it was achieved. We will even go back a bit in history, make some comparisons regarding to how the APNU AFC government dealt with that whole situation of Guyana being blacklisted as against to how the former administration dealt with that issue. So the Attorney General is here with me. I should also, just to give some information, the Attorney General is also the Deputy Chair, current Deputy Chair of CFATF. He'll also tell you what that really means for Guyana at this point. He is going to be the Deputy Chair from 2016, this year, of course, to 2017, and then he's expected to assume the chair from 2017 to 2018. But as I said, you will hear all about that from him. He will tell you what that means not only for him, but for Guyana and for the government of Guyana. Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Basil Williams, welcome back to Facing the Nation, sir.
Thank you, Malika.
All right.
It's a pleasure to be here.
All right.
It's been some time.
Yes, it has, and it really is good to have you back. Viewers, as I did say, he's here to explain. But before we even have our full conversation, again, just to put our discussion into context, earlier in this week, we had the first, since Guyana was removed from this compliance document, we had the first official briefing by the Attorney General's chambers earlier this week. That would have been on Wednesday at his office. I'll give you the opening statement, and then we will come back and have that discussion. The opening statement is just about 3 minutes, so stay with Facing the Nation. And again, this part of the program is just to put our discussion into context. Stay with us.
Of the media, the Attorney General's Chambers and Ministry of Legal Affairs press statement for October 26, 2016. Exiting FATF, a collective victory. The collaboration between the APNU plus AFC government and the Guyanese people and institutions resulted in Guyana's successful exit from the FATF ICRG process. The high-level political commitment of President Brigadier David Arthur Granger, the drive and leadership given by the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Mr. Basil Williams, and his compliance team, and the contribution of the FIU under the helm of the Minister of Finance, Mr. Winston Jordan, were matched by the responsiveness of the Guyanese financial institutions, the private sector, and law enforcement institutions. These latter institutions profoundly impressed the FATF ICRG's on-site team members with their knowledge of the FATF standards to combat money laundering and terrorist financing. The common thread running through these bodies is the employee called, and I quote, the compliance officer, who has emerged as the gladiator in the fight to secure Guyana's adherence to the FATF's requirements. At the FATF conference in Paris on the 18th of October 2016, in the FATF ICRG meeting, Spain moved the motion to recommend that Guyana be removed from the compliance document. Spain's motion was then supported by the United States of America, the United Kingdom, Canada, Italy, France, and Mexico. It was because of such solid support that the recommendation that Guyana exit the process was unanimously adopted by the FATF plenary meeting 2 days later. In both meetings, the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs thanked these countries, the Americas Region Review Group, the ARRG, assessors, the CFATF Secretariat, and the FATF ICRG assessors for their support on behalf of the President and the government of Guyana. Guyana's removal from the FATF compliance document paves the way for a similar removal from the CFATF's monitoring process come November 2016. The APNUAFC government registers its appreciation for the support given by Mr. Brian Hunt, former deputy head of mission in the United States Embassy, and notes that he is vindicated by our success. Guyana cannot be complacent as the fourth round mutual evaluation beckons, where the test is whether we would have shown, and I quote, sufficient progress on effectiveness, end of quote. For example, having more convictions for offenses of money laundering, terrorist financing, and purloining of state assets. This ends our statements.
Thank you very much. All right, what you heard there is the opening statement by the Attorney General last Wednesday at the first official press conference held after this big victory. And for those of you now joining us, today is a conversation with Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, who is also the Deputy Chair of CFATF, the Honorable Basil Williams. Attorney General, let's get right into the discussion. Even after listening to your statement that you made, the statement you made on Wednesday, by saying that Guyana has been removed from FATF's compliance document, what does that mean?
Well, that's a status that a country is placed in if the FATF considers that they still have strategic deficiencies in relation to the application of FATF standards and confirmation with those standards. Failure to implement those standards also. So that if you, in your action plan, had 10 elements, you complete 5, you don't exit. They put you into the compliance document. And if you have about 2 left, as that happened with us, you still remain in the compliance document. The next stage, if you really are an aberration in the international financial system, you enter into the public statement. And countries like DPRK and others would be in those statements. And that's when FATF members around the world are encouraged to adopt severe countermeasures against you. And so, being in that compliance document, it was an alert to the rest of the international financial community that when dealing with Guyana, they have to take excessive caution.
And that's what we were calling blacklist.
Well, the blacklisting is a term that was associated with the CFATF regime. And that's a FATF-style regional body, the CFAT, Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. And they too had a public statement, but they have gray and light gray lists and black lists. You would recall when we took office that Guyana, in fact, was confronted with this situation where 3 public statements were already issued against Guyana, against the last government, and still not complying with the requirements of FATF. The CFATF then referred them to FATF. And there was an evaluation done by the FATF, and an action plan was developed and agreed to between FATF and Guyana. And the contents of that action plan, we were required to implement. Of course, the last government failed to implement that. And so when we took over, we were saddled with the task of having to exit both CFATF and FATF.
Okay. Implementation aside, what has Basil Williams, the Attorney General's chambers, and the government of Guyana, current government I'm speaking of, done differently to the previous administration? Because in listening to you, am I to understand that we got into this mess through the previous administration in the first place? Yes,
that's generally looked to be inherited total mess. But this was one aspect of that mess. Where, the confidence of the international community in dealing with business with Guyana businesses and so was not at the requisite level. And our tasks, even in opposition, we had started with this, if you recall. And in the parliament, in the special select committee, we had a team dealing with them. And they actually had their own version of a bill, and we had our version. And so when we came into office, we asserted our version. And remember, there was this discussion that our version was not accepted by FATF, if you recall all those things. And that's where I told you that Mr. Hunt came out and actually went to public and supported our version of that bill.
And viewers, just to interject, AG, for those of you who were wondering, when he said Mr. Hunt, he's talking about the former deputy head of mission of the U.S. Embassy. And really and truly, that is a big deal to have that kind of support.
And, of course, he was met by intensive vituperation on the part of the last government.
Yes.
But he stopped his guns and he continued to support us. But so that was the situation. And we had to therefore go about the business of bringing Guyana back from being a pariah state in this context. And so we had to deal with CFATF. We discovered that in all there were about 9 follow-up reports that the last government had to deal with, and still were unable to be FATF compliant with the recommendations of FATF. Equally, they were not compliant with the recommendation of CFATF. And we wish to put on record that we only had to deal with 1 follow-up report, which is the 11th follow-up report. And that was accepted by FATF as having satisfied the core and key recommendations. And that entitled us to apply to exit. But as you know, we couldn't exit CFATF until we exited FATF, with which we had the action plan. Fortunately, too, FATF at the same time was saying we had satisfied all of their core and key recommendations also in the action plan, and that we could also be eligible to exit. But in that case, you couldn't exit unless the FATF ordered an on-site visit. And remember, the on-site visit was ordered, and before the on-site team came to Guyana, we had what we call sensitization exercises, where I felt that it was necessary for us to go and have a discourse with the various supervisory bodies and their reporting agencies, so that when the team came and the team were to interview any of them, at least they would be in a state of consciousness and preparedness in respect to the applications of the FATF standards and confirmation and sustaining those standards. And I wish to say that when we went on that exercise, we went about our business quietly. We met with the Bank of Guyana, we met with the Securities Exchange Commission, we met with cooperatives, we met with all the commercial banks, the money transfer agencies, we met with cambios, we met with brokers, we met with the gold board. We in fact met with what I would call the financial aspect of our economy. And we talking about insurance companies, and I was very impressed with the knowledge and acceptance by these bodies of the need to be FATF compliant.
With this happening for us, this victory, if you want to call it that, do you believe that we will get more respect? And I'm going into the realm of business here, because eventually we're going to talk about what this has done and what it's doing for the ordinary man in the street, and especially business person. But on the international scene, do you believe that Guyana would have gained some more respect and recognition by coming off of this compliance document?
Of course. I mean, that's the anvil for everything, as you would have read in the papers too, that our ratings as a country for doing business in almost automatically or immediately shot up too. And so it is a signal. It's a signal to the international community, financial community, that, look, this is a country where you wouldn't necessarily have to face too many risks when you're dealing with business with them. Because you must understand, and this is what I wish to emphasize, I've always said that, this business of financing of terrorism and money laundering, they're taken seriously by the international community. Because people are being killed in those countries. You know, terrorist acts are being committed there. And if terrorists don't have the opportunity to move money around, it's going to be terribly difficult. In fact, the FATF standards have started to kick in. And so money laundering has become very tenuous. We have reports of people have to build structures, buildings, to keep the dollars in because they can't use the international financial system to move that money around and clean it up. And so it's very important. And that's why you had countries too were pulling out because of the risk. They thought that the correspondent banks felt that the risks were too great. And so if a country is listed in any document for the CFATF or FATF, it's really an alert against that country. And it's an alert of potential investor that, hey, you're taking a chance if you want to come into Guyana and do any serious business. So it's very important that we are seen around the world not to be a country that is a risk to the international and a threat to the international financial system.
Okay, well, we're going to give viewers, we're going to talk a bit about the history and how we really got here because, you know, this is very, very important. But before we do that, what I'm going to do, the telephone numbers are on the bottom of our screen as usual. I am going to, the phone lines are open. However, I would like, if you're going to call, if you have I'd like your questions to be centered on this issue. Those of you who have questions on FATF and CFATF and anything that has to do with this topic, we'll be happy to take those questions because the Attorney General is prepared to answer those questions. He can also respond to any other government question you have, but I am choosing not to have that because I don't want to stray. I don't want the Attorney General to stray too much from the FATF issue because, as he's saying, this really is a big victory for Guyana. So if the first 2 or 3 calls insist on calling off the topic, we're going to discontinue that. But for now, the phone lines are open if you have questions, anything relating to this, and the Attorney General can probably oblige you with some other matters. Sir, let's talk about the position that you hold in terms of FATF and CFATF. You are currently the Deputy Chair of CFATF. What does that mean for Basil Williams and the government of Guyana?
Well, basically, it's something, I would feel it's a benefit for Guyana. And I think it's because of our approach as a government in dealing with this whole idea of and task of complying with the FATF standards and implementing them. And I must say that from the outset, the President of Guyana, Brigadier David Granger, had indicated to the FATF President, he gave a high-level commitment, what they call a high-level commitment, that his country was prepared to adopt the FATF standards and to comply and implement its recommendations.
Is it normal for the Attorney General of, and of course, viewers, this is not anything negative against the Attorney General, but I'm asking, is it normal for the Attorney General or the Minister of Legal Affairs of a country so soon after taking office, because again, I'm trying to establish how big this is, so soon after taking office to ascend to that chair?
Well, I know I can't answer that, but I believe that I have been asked to serve because they felt that the type of work I was doing for Guyana might have attracted their attention. You must recall that the Americans Region Review Group, who are our assessors, they did say that that we had in fact passed so many pieces of legislation within a short time frame. And I recall the Canadians themselves said to pass one piece of legislation in Canada would have taken 16 months, if not more. And so they were impressed with our approach. And our approach had a lot to do with the political commitment given at the highest level of our country by the President. And it showed political will it showed a political will on the part of the APNU AFC government to effect compliance with the international standards set up and established by the FATF, Financial Task Force.
All right.
Which was a far cry from what happened over the last from 2000 to 15
All right.
under the last regime.
We're going to come to that, Attorney General, but I think we have a caller. Caller, are you there?
Yes.
Do you have a question on today's issue? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes. The question that why the economy and that system with the World Bank and other outlets have to check that step is because of the governor of the bank, Govin Ganga, is not running that bank properly. Let me give you some good quick mathematics and economics.
All right, caller, I tell you what. If you have a question, caller.
Yeah, 3 minutes. Let me just give him a thing.
You have 1 minute.
639 million of the cameo. That is not business. That is no business. You're supposed to buy it at the Bank of Guyana. So how did you get your money to service your different debts in terms of drugs, buying medicine, and these things? The Lombard Street man making all the money, and the state now left in limbo. And this is why they go. And if you earn in $2.50 an hour, which is 10 US,
30 seconds,
you can't buy
caller.
the food. So the question you have, the finance minister has to fail and shut those cameo down. Let everything go back to the Bank of Guyana, and then you will be able to get at 140 to a US. And that is business. Will be turned over.
All right, caller. Unfortunately, we lost that caller. Attorney General, I don't know if there's much that you can say regarding that.
The question of shutting down cambios, well, obviously that will have to be a policy decision. What is known is that once they exist, they have to come within the FATF requirements. Mm-hmm. And as we have met with the cambios in Guyana, and we were very impressed because these people employ compliance officers. I had reached that stage to tell you about the compliance officer, which is a gladiator in this whole process. And they have these businesses well positioned to conform with FATF requirements and who to accept money from and who not to accept money from, who to accept gold from, and who, that type of thing. So they are very conscious about money laundering, and they need to be alerted on the alarms that they encounter, and they have to do what you call a suspicious transaction report if they believe that they had an encounter with a money launderer.
Okay, all right. Let's do a bit of a history. How did Guyana get here before the APNU AFC government, took it?
Well, I think since in 2000, you sign off. You sign off on these treaties and conventions, and once you sign off, the other signatories, they expect that you would conform. And so in around with 2002, 2004, they did a mutual evaluation. They started a process since then. Our first anti-money laundering act was in 2000, But of course, nothing happened. And in 2009, they passed the anti-money laundering and countering finance of terrorism, which they added on. Mm-hmm. And they built in the FIU to have this role of being the analyst and the investigatory arm and research body, the FIU. And this FIU was supposed to, when they come up with their reports and their findings, send those findings and reports on to the investigative body. And that later came on stream, SOQ. And they would then proceed. But nothing had happened. Nobody was investigated. Nobody was charged. Nobody was taken to court. But when we came into office, all that changed.
All that changed, okay.
Yes. And there have been many matters, many persons investigated, many persons are being investigated still, and many have been charged.
Okay, all
but
right.
we haven't had the successes, as I understand it,
All right.
convictions.
Okay, let's try, and we're going to talk about those convictions and something you said at the press conference earlier this week. But let's try to call the phones again, see if our callers are willing to behave. Caller, are you there?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to know if the FATF know about the amount of robbery that the Indian people get in.
All right. Well, once we're going to go race issue, you know that Malika Ramsey does not tolerate those conversations on this program at all, because we have a government that is all about social cohesion and trying to improve our state, where we're trying to get people out of this mindset that is in some cases very, very backward. And, caller, I trust that you do take offense with what I just said.
I thought he was talking about robberies.
Robberies. I mean,
Yeah,
the Attorney General, I have no problem with it. The Attorney General is going to make a general statement on what's happening with the state of crime. But my issue is when you're going to turn it into a race fight. Attorney General?
No, but basically, what do you talk? I mean, but this government is here now from May 2015. We have come from a situation of almost a nearly failed state. Ghana was almost like a failed state.
Agreed.
We had a situation where Ghana was a killing field under the last government. There was no law, the law and order had broken down in Guyana. You had gangsters saying that they're in charge of enforcing the law in Ghana. I mean, look, what is happening under our government is a godsend. And the crime, I don't know if the people who are talking about crime simulating those crimes, but we are making every effort to deal with crime of all classifications. And there is no way and there are no circumstances under which anyone, any objective person could, in examining what happened before May 2015 and examine now, could feel in any way that the situation has gotten worse.
Great.
It was, there was no public security under the last regime. Young people were targeted. Young people were made pawns. Young boys, 13 years, 16 years, were visited with 3 murder charges for doing. I know, I was there. I saw the look on their faces. They just didn't know what was happening to them. When you see them come out from the prison and come to court, 3 murder charges. They had to go to 3 separate trials. But in the interim, they're growing up in prison. Nobody should take us back. No, let's go back. There's nothing to endear any nation, any country to the atrocities and the criminality that existed under the last government.
And that is why, at this point,
don't let us revisit those things. Let's look forward.
I'm
and
going to bring it back to FATF.
Assist this government in combating crime.
One of the things that you said at the press conference earlier this week, and it's so that I can just read exactly here so the viewers can get an understanding of where I'm going with this question. Guyana cannot be complacent as the 4th round mutual evaluation beckons, where the test is whether we would have shown, quote unquote, sufficient progress or effectiveness. What do you mean by that? Is there a danger of us or for want of a better word, stepping back into where we came from?
Yes, there is. Now look, this 3rd round, we just exited the FATF process, but we were in the 3rd round. We're still in the 3rd round, and not until we go in November and exit the CFATF, then we can finish with the 3rd
completely.
round.
Okay.
No, but this 3rd round was dedicated largely to the legal and regulatory framework, right? So we had passed a lot of legislation and address regulations to deal with a lot of the requirements of FATF. Mm-hmm. What they did with the on-site visit was simply to come to see whether we had introduced them, and 2, whether we had embarked on the implementation of them, and thirdly, whether there was political commitment to sustain them, right? And that's what they did. They came and they saw. But the 4th round now, the test in that 4th round is stronger. They look to see effective implementation. In other words, it might be good in the 3rd round to say, look, we have now investigated people, we have charged people, we have taken them to court, we prosecuted them. But we haven't had many convictions. that would be wholly unacceptable in the fourth round, because there can't be effective implementation unless you have convictions.
So, in essence, what should we as a country be doing now, between now and November, now and the fourth round?
Well, the fourth round, we're going to have an assessment, a mutual evaluation in 2020.
Okay.
So you have sufficient time. We have to now indulge in self-assessment. As I was telling you, those sensitization exercises that we conducted, we were able to recognize the areas of weaknesses. So we have to address those areas. We have just completed a national risk assessment, and it hasn't been complete in the sense of having a report done. But the national risk assessment was to identify areas of risk. And when you identify those areas, then you have to adopt measures to address those risks and correct them. So what we have to do is to ensure our supervisory agencies, our reporting bodies, that they continue to apply the FATF requirements. Customer due diligence. If somebody goes to a bank to open an account, they have to go through the due diligence requirements laid down by FATF. They want to know if it's a company, you must know who's the ultimate owner of this company, natural person, who's the ultimate owner of the company. So these things you have to apply, all right? And we have to keep working, we have to do self-assessments, and having identified the weaknesses, the reason why we're not getting convictions, as I identified, is that there was a lacuna. There was no training under the AML CFT regime of investigators in relation to money laundering offenses for the purposes of the act. And so we need to train investigators to understand the ingredients of the offense that would get a successful conviction for money laundering.
Can you see us achieving that? Is it a case where you have to
Yes,
take that
could.
proposal to cabinet or?
Yeah, we do. We have to. The international community is willing to help too. And you have to train the prosecutors to prosecute the case so that you will have success in these money laundering prosecutions. And you have to train or expose the magistrates and the judges also to understand.
Is there I'm probably asking you to look into a crystal ball here, but is there a reason as a country that we are now addressing, and I'm talking specifically about training of magistrates, prosecutors, and so on. Is there a reason that is now going to happen? Why has that not happened before?
Well, we would say that it's a practice that is developed certainly in specialized areas of law, like cybercrime, for example.
Okay.
There's a new area of law and offenses that have been created. You know the nonsense that has happened on the internet, and threats made and stuff like that. So you have to train the investigators to understand what is a cybercrime offense and so like that. And the prosecutors have to also understand what the ingredients are when they have to establish them in the court. And the judges and magistrates must also appreciate the nature of such offenses. It's equally the same thing under the money laundering regime and financing of terrorism. So unless we have that type of training, we're going to have that kind of problem where large sums of monies, you are found that people are found in possession of large sums of money. They are charged and that these monies are suspected of being the product of money laundering. And money laundering obviously is tied into a list of offenses in that act, including the trafficking offenses and so. But when you go to the court, you have to prove that. I mean, a lot of times people pass through the airport and they have more than the 10,000 US they didn't announce. They have heavy gold necklaces, and when they reach out places, they have gold bars they export, etc. And so, you know that they didn't get it from Sunday school.
To what extent, if any at all, would we request or accept international assistance to train our people in this field?
No, but we have always been accepting. We have always been working with the international community, the ABC countries, and they've always been affording us opportunities to go to seminars, go and, to different
What specifically in this area? It won't be a difference.
But you see, that that lacuna wasn't identified.
Okay.
Now that it's identified, we're sure that we could get that kind of assistance, of course. Look, at the FATF in Paris, at that meeting, when Spain moved recommended a motion to recommend Guyana exit the FATF compliance document, which we mean exit the FATF ICRG process, I was surprised when I saw the United States representative supported it. The United Kingdom representative supported it. The Canadian representative, the Italian, Italy, France, and Mexico. Now, they didn't have to come out, all of them. I mean, you need one other person to come out and say, yes, we support it, and basically it went like that. But to me, when the representatives of those countries did that, it signaled to me that there was an understanding by their governments of the efforts that the Guyana government had made to reach that stage in combating that money laundering, financing, and financing of terrorism.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the regular Guyanese like me, especially the business persons. Now, how should they take this news and what should they do to contribute and help? Because I always say that, cooperation is what is needed and we need to work as a country. How can they contribute to helping Guyana achieve more victory and greatness when it comes to FATF and CFATF?
But businessmen, I would say the business community, which will involve all the banks and financial agencies, etc., cameos. I think we could look at that by looking at the comparative situation. Before and after. When we would have taken office, the business community would have been on the strictures, certainly in dealing with international business and so. And countries dealing with Guyana were required to put Guyana on the stringent tests and requirements, which you call due diligence and enhanced due diligence and all these things. But, it's like if you hear DPARK, then basically you got to throw the kitchen sink of requirements and standards at them. If a DPRK bank wants to come and establish a branch in Guyana, according to the FATF rules, they are virtually indicating that shouldn't even happen. Because the third limb that is tagged on now by the FATF to money laundering and countering the finance of terrorism is also the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. And they're saying that DPRK require that kind of financing to be able to be testing missiles all the time. And so they have added that also, that countries should be on the watch out and on guard for the proliferation of the financing for weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, all right.
But as I said, if you compare what we came and met, so transactions took longer because people had to do the assessments and all these things. Now that you've been, the global body has said, hey, these people clean, then transactions would not and ought not to be so tenuous anymore for our Guyanese business community when dealing with international bodies and international banks and all these things.
Okay.
Right? Because there's no alert, no, you're clean and stuff. But also, it doesn't mean that you don't drop all the standards that you have implemented. You have to continue to apply these FATF standards that we have introduced.
What do you think would be the difficulty in upholding those standards where Guyana is concerned?
I don't really see any difficulty. As I said to you, I was very impressed when I met all these bodies that they're so conscious of what the requirements are and that they themselves have been applying it. So I'm impressed with them, and all they have to do is continue to apply. And FATF has evolved as a very important player, very powerful player right now in the international world economy, because the G20 leaders are actually asking the FATF to do research on different areas, like right now on beneficial ownership. That is trying, the people can't hide behind other people and hide behind different things and manipulate from behind there. So they want to know who's the ultimate person, the ultimate human being that is in charge of an enterprise or any legal arrangement or legal entity. Equally with correspondent banking and things like de-risking. They've asked FATF to also do a paper and present on that. In fact, the FATF president would be attending G8 and G20 meetings, as I understand it.
Okay.
So the organization,
It's
the
more
usefulness of the
hands-on.
organization has been seen around the world. And so we just have to continue and developing on what we have implemented, and so that when the evaluation comes around, we don't end up to come and find that we are not compliant, and we end up back in this whole process of being on the list
And on that note,
and in compliance documents and public statements.
that would be very bad and put us in a negative light, especially, and viewers, I did tell you earlier, and the Attorney General touched on this a bit, the fact that he's currently Deputy Chair of CFATF, and he will assume the chair in 2017.
But let me say that at the last ministerial meeting in Miami, I was elected deputy chair. So you take office at the next meeting, which is next month in November. You assume your duties then. A year later, you automatically assume the chair.
It's automatic.
Yes,
so.
and then after your year is completed, you remain as the immediate past chair. So what that system they have is really dealing with institutional memory, so that when they identify somebody, that they feel that, okay, the person could contribute, but the person doesn't go in for a year and then you lose all that memory. So the process they have is like a 3-year turnaround, and so by then you retaining a lot of the memory that you would have had in the first year, down to the 3rd year. So Al-Wari, who is the current chair, he comes out of the chair next month, and that is taken by the Attorney General from Turks and Caicos, Ms. Rhonda Lee Braffett, a lady. He will still remain within the model that we have as the immediate past chair. So you would be benefiting from his experience whilst he was in the chair.
Okay, all right. Viewers, I think we got a lot out of the Attorney General regarding the FATF, CFATF conversation. Of course, he has to keep the fire burning and keep it going and keep Guyana complying, so I'll have to let him get back to his schedule a bit in a minute or two. I can't have the Attorney General on this program and not put him on the, I shouldn't even say put him on the spot, because I don't know that it will be putting him on the spot, because I think he can handle almost anything that's thrown at him. And this is just for the fun of it and good measure, because sometimes it's amusing what the opposition comes up with. Attorney General and the Minister of State was even asked this at an earlier press conference. The government is coming in for some criticisms, and this is me breaking my own rule and going off topic. The government has recently been criticized for temporarily, and I must stress, viewers, temporarily hosting cabinet press briefings at the officers' mess at Kampai in Ghana. Of course, the opposition went into whole animation mode and criticized. I'm just giving you an opportunity just to, if you can address this issue for a minute or two.
No, well, in addressing it, I supported it. I don't have a difficulty with it. I've attended my first meeting, in fact, this week. Look, we have to affect the repairs to the Secretariat. Now, you will recall the President had actually identified a building within the curtilage of State House, that is a museum, the Walter Rock Museum, and a sudden noise was made with this, And it's clear that he was, I think it was operating in his mind, which way could he get a secured venue? And I don't know if I contributed to that, because I keep telling him and the cabinet that, look, when I was in Panama, I actually saw that they had the FIU. The FIU was situated and located within the Army base, within the Army base. So there are certain things that you do you definitely have to have the type of security for it. So where would the cabinet feel secure? In the convention center?
That is going on the repairs soon.
Not even if it weren't going on the repairs. The convention center is a big place to police, because you have so many sections that you know is a, you could hold something on the eastern wing. You have the main body and all that. So what are you talking about? You got to bring a battalion to secure the cabinet wise it met. So I don't see what's the big problem with that. You have the other thing about the location and the ability to supply documentation and people at a short notice and all these things. I know about that because when we were setting up the Running Commission of Inquiry, we recognized that on the site where you're having the hearings, you have to have the ability to service there. You have to have the ability to photocopy documents, do this, do that, and so I had like a secretary, the type of thing. So there's a space there for it. There's the security built in within that the curtilage of the Army base. And I don't have a problem. I don't know what's the problem.
Okay, I don't think they're even
I don't
sure.
know who would want to come in and disturb the cabinet meeting. I see people making all kind of statements about what happening in our cabinet business. And so I support the move to have the meetings there. And it's temporary.
Okay, great. Exactly. Keyword temporary. And before I wrap up my conversation, AG, just to bring back the conversation where we began, just in a minute or so, remind Guyana that this really is a victory, us coming off of this compliance document, and the fact that the AG's chambers will continue to work toward more success for Guyana in this area.
Let me say though, that we have a compliance team. And that team comprises of representatives from the AG chambers, from the FIU, for example. But one of the things we'll have to look at now, because in most of the region, the countries in the region, you have the central bank will have a role in the. We should have some representation. So we'll look and see, going to the fourth round, how we could the need to strengthen the team and widen the team a bit. And certainly we should have the central bank plays a very important role in this process. Because it's a regulatory agency, it's a supervisory body that has on its purview all the banks, insurance companies, and they like Palmbrook, I think Cambio's Palmbrook, all those financial bodies. So in some countries, they drive the process. In other countries, they FIU. When I say drive in terms of, but the designated minister always, most of the time, is the Attorney General in every country.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you so very much, sir. Of course, viewers, if you're now tuning in, you missed a great conversation. Those of you who follow me on social media can catch the conversation subsequently. That's either by the end of today or tomorrow. You can get this very conversation on my YouTube channel or on Facebook as usual. Of course, this has been a conversation with the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, who is also the Deputy Chair of CFATF, the Honorable Basil Williams. What I'll do is take a very quick break, and on the other side of the break, I'll begin to wrap up today's program. This is Facing the Nation. Thank you very much for staying tuned. Unfortunately, this has brought us to the end of this week's edition of Facing the Nation. We gave you almost a full hour of the Attorney General, and of course we talked about FATF and so on. And I can promise you I'll continue to give you updates as he moved towards ensuring that Guyana is in the right position when it comes to this issue. It's not often we get the Attorney General to have him on for almost the entire hour. So we'd like to thank him and, of course, his office as usual. I want to take this opportunity again. It's the weekend. It's a holiday weekend. Please, people, I keep begging you, please be careful on our roadways. Still too many traffic accidents. We know Operation Safeway is out there. I spoke to you a few weeks ago about the fact that they need to do much more, but you as citizens need to take the responsibility to ensure that you do not drink and drive, do not speed, and especially look out for our little ones. It was really heartbreaking to watch that video that went around on social media with these two little boys being hit by a container truck. And, you know, God is so good that yes, unfortunately they were knocked, but they ended up under the truck instead of under the wheel. So they're both out of the hospital and they've recovered well and they're fine. Please look out for our little ones. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for tuning in. Be good Guyanese citizens. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And of course, join me again next week. This has been Facing the Nation.